I've recently heard about a thing called the Scarecrow Festival. It was in a local village. And while I was looking into it out of curiosity, I came across an article about pre-feudal Japan using scarecrows called the Kakashi. So this got me curious about the history of the scarecrow, like an inanimate object. So here we're going to a deep dive into the history of the scarecrow. As you know, the scarecrow is one of the most familiar figures in the rural landscape, not only in England but throughout Europe, America and most of the world. His ragged figure has been recorded in rural history for centuries, and his image has proven irresistible to writers from William Shakespeare to Walter de la Mare, as well as filmmakers since the dawn of the silent movies. Yet despite all this fame, the origins and development of the scarecrow remained obscure and mystery. Anyone who watches horror movies regularly knows how creepy scarecrows can be, but on the flip side, sometimes they're fun and decorated in a country cute style, or silly like the lovable one off the If I Had a Brain type Wizard of Oz. Although they haven't always looked the way they do now. The scarecrow's been around a long time and have been used in a number of different cultures. Now, scarecrow's interesting history dates back to over 3,000 years to Egypt and ancient Greece. Now, the first scarecrows in recorded history were sighted along the Nile, and they were there to protect wheat fields from flocks of quail, and they were called Kaal el Hakl, roughly translated means silhouette on the farm. And then we have in the fields of ancient Greece wooden statues, and they were placed in the fields carved to represent Priapus. Although he was the son of Aphrodite, Priapus was also hideously ugly, and his most prominent feature was his constant huge erection, and birds tended to avoid fields where Priapus resided. Which is surprising really, because they'd have somewhere to perch. And as Greek influence spread into Roman territory, the Roman farmers soon adopted the same practice. Now in pre-feudal Japan, they used different kinds of scarecrows on the rice fields, but the most popular was the Kakashi. Old dirty rags, noisemakers like bells and stickers, were mounted on a pole in a field and then lit on fire. But eventually Japanese farmers began making scarecrows that looked like people in raincoats and hats, a bit like dirty old men, and sometimes they're equipped with weaponry to make them look even more frightening. And next we travel in time to the Vanir, who were like Norse gods of protection and prosperity, keeping the local settlements safe from harm. Now, some villagers built effigies of the Vanir to keep in their fields like scarecrows, while others practiced darker arts like human sacrifice. Dryads were originally the spirits of oak trees, pagan gods that resided in ancient trees, but the name was later applied to all tree nymphs. And each year the people of the villages would present the tree with a young man and woman as a sacrifice to ensure the prosperity of the village and its crops. And the god was thought to inhabit the form of this scarecrow made from the body of its victims, and they kill the couple with a hooked blade like a scythe. I'm sure I've seen that plot in some horror movies. And it's believed that the god or spirit lived only as long as the trees they inhabited, and can only be vanquished when the sacred tree is destroyed with fire. As you know, scarecrows are made to look human-like, but they're expressionless, as in the case of clowns. And for us, the inability to interpret facial expressions can provoke fear. And the scarecrow we know now came into its own about 500 years ago in Europe, specifically in Britain and Ireland. And during the Middle Ages, in Britain, Europe, Ireland, small children worked as crow scarers. And the job was to run round the fields clapping blocks of wood together to frighten away birds that might eat the grain. And as the medieval period wound down, the population decreased due to the plague, and farmers discovering there was a shortage of spare children to scamper around shooing birds away. What a shame, eh? So instead they stuffed old clothes with straw and placed a turnip or gourd on top and mounted the figure in the fields. And they soon found that these lifelike guardians did a pretty good job of keeping the crows away, and you didn't have to pay them like children, if they paid them. And around the same time, a Dark Age practice from Ireland appeared in Europe. This ancient practice was known as the jack-o'-lantern. Now, jack-o'-lantern came from old Irish and British stories about a trickster who was doomed to wander in death between heaven and hell. And to make his way, he carried a lantern made out of a carved pumpkin or turnip, and it held a candle. And on Halloween, the veil between heaven and earth is at its thinnest. And the story says that night was the time that Jack-o'-lantern thought he had the best chance to cross over into the next world. Anyway, this practice eventually moved to Europe, and the farmers took Jack's lantern and used it for the head of the Scarecrow. And eventually, over time, the idea of the Scarecrow moved to America, along with the stories of Jack-o'-lantern. So during the heyday of this American agricultural period, scarecrows became a popular sight on the fields. But following the World War II, farmers realised they could accomplish a lot more by spraying their crops with pesticides like DDT. And this went on to the 1960s, when they eventually learnt their lesson. A form of scarecrow is also found in Native American cultures. In some parts, what is now Virginia and the Carolinas, before European man arrived, adult men sat on raised platforms and shouted at birds or ground animals that came near the crops. And it's said that some Native American children had contests to see who could make their most frightening scarecrow, a bit like they do in a local village near me. And the Zuni tribe used to use lines of cedar poles strung with cord and animal skins to keep away the birds. And as the waves of immigrants left Europe, Germans settled in Pennsylvania brought with them the Bootsman or Bogeyman, which stands guard over the fields. And sometimes a female counterpart was added to the opposite side of the field or orchard. Now, apparently you can incorporate scarecrows into your own magical workings. And the best part is that neighbours won't know what you're up to, because you can place a scarecrow in your own garden to protect your crops from birds and other pesky critters. In addition, though, you may want to display one on your front porch or at the edge of your property to keep intruders away. For a little magical boost, place a protective stone such as hematite inside its body. You could also stuff it with protective herbs like violet, thistle, honeysuckle, fennel, etc. Now, I think some farmers use them as to scare people instead of a scarecrow, because they didn't want walkers on their land. In the past, over here in England, Britain, scarecrows were burnt as sacrifices during pagan ceremonies to bring a good harvest. But when Christianity arrived, this practice, like so many old rituals, was stamped out because it was considered to be debauched. Although I've heard somewhere in Sussex they still burn effigies of the Pope on Guy Fawkes night. Bless them. And I think possibly the decline is due to when farming technology started with the Industrial Revolution. And the hectic life of the farmer means that he doesn't have time to even feel the earth or walk on it. He just sits up there in his huge machine, protected against the elements, listening to music, and is high off the ground. He may be high as well, who knows. Separated from the earth and its natural properties. And many of the hedgerows have gone to make larger areas. Lots of wildlife has disappeared, but somehow the crow survives. The farmer of old would have once a year sown his land by hand, after the land had been lovingly prepared and tended. Now this is all done by machine. Gone are the days when the farmer used to discard his old clothes and create a friendly little looking chap to sit in the corner of his field and scare the bejesus out of the local children. But farmers today barely make a scarecrow. They try electronic ones, pop-up balloon types and all sorts, trying to find the answer. The birds soon get wise to these. I think scarecrows have a mystical feel about them, and I believe they can still do the job better than these mechanical things.